All right, let's get started. My name is Jeff Anderson, and I'm here with my colleague Mike Finnegan. And it is no secret that we represent, 378 survivors in the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis bankruptcy. But we're here today to discuss further a filing that began last night in the bankruptcy court involving the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis bankruptcy. And that filing has been made, and I'm holding on to it right here, has been made first by the committee, or the creditors committee, which is comprised of the survivors, by Rob Kugler representing the committee. Our firm has joined in this motion. This motion is to the bankruptcy court to require the bankruptcy court and the Archdiocese to include all of their assets, all of their funds that the Archbishop actually controls and has sole authority over into the bankruptcy estate, so it can be considered for the full and fair resolution of the claims. And when I say all of the funds, I mean a number of entities are not included now and should be in the bankruptcy. The Archdiocese, in its filings so far, has refused or failed to disclose its true worth and has deceived the court, has deceived the survivors again, and has attempted to enter into a scheme, both short-term and long-term, to avoid financial responsibility for the harm that they allowed to be done. They have represented so far to the bankruptcy court and to us that they have assets that approximate tens of millions of dollars, up to $40 million, Mike?
49.
$49 million they have so far represented to us and to the court. That is the value of their assets in total. The real value as reflected in these documents and financial records and scrutiny that we and the committee have done reveal that their true assets are $1.7 billion. Now, when we look at their financial transactions and what they've been doing and how they've been doing it, it is absolutely indisputable that the Archbishop is in control of a variety of corporations. And under the structure that the Archbishop is required to operate under, he has control over a variety of corporations that have been set up for many years and have been recently set up and or changed for two reasons. One, the Child Victims Act, which was passed 3 years ago and soon to expire tomorrow. And second, once they filed bankruptcy and knew they were going to file bankruptcy, they started to change their documentation and the representations they were making to the people and thus to the court. There are really 5 areas I'm going to use as examples of where they misrepresented or underrepresented their financial worth. The Catholic Community Foundation, the Catholic Services Appeal, Catholic Charities, the Catholic Cemeteries, and the Catholic Finance Corporation. And they also have underrepresented and not represented the parishes to be a part of the bankruptcy estate, and they would be, and I'll be touching on that. So let me begin by what we have uncovered and what these documents show. And first, as to the Archdiocese Catholic Cemeteries. Now, the Archdiocese Catholic Cemeteries have never been disclosed as being an asset of the Archdiocese, ever. But when we look at the Catholic cemeteries, and we see that the Catholic cemeteries had been held by the Archdiocese. But since the passage of the Child Victims Act and the lawsuits that were brought under it, and since the filing of their bankruptcy, they have been involved in serious chicanery when it comes to the Catholic cemeteries as well as other entities. Illustration. Catholic cemeteries were created by the Archbishop in the Archdiocese. They've always been headed by the Archdiocese and the Archbishop, and they've always been held by the Archdiocese. Child Victim Act passes, and the bankruptcy ensues, and they file for Chapter 11. And this is in my declaration, Exhibit 16A. We see a picture of St. Mary's Cemetery. It says the Catholic Cemeteries, Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis. Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis. After the Child Victims Act and the filing of bankruptcy, what have they done? They took a paintbrush and they went to every cemetery, this one included, and this is an example, that right here, they painted over the name Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis. They have never listed this on any of their schedules and never represented it to be a part of their assets. And you can see on the screen here where it was a little clearer originally, and then you can see on 16, that's a close-up. And let's go to 16, let's go to 14C. Here we have Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis. This is another cemetery. Let's go to 14A. After the filing of bankruptcy and the Child Victims Act passage, we now have, does that show the Archdiocese there?
It's where they painted over. So you can
This is-
paint and
this
see
is-
it if you get
This
close.
is where they painted over, but did a sloppy job. So it's not just sloppy, it's sinister. When we look at 14E, these are all exhibits attached to my affidavit, pictures that we've taken. We see
Same.
a little better that has been painted over. When we look at 15E, we see other example here of, this one was painted over. where they painted over the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, and try to hold this out, thus, to the people, to the court, to the survivors, and to the public, that it is not an Archdiocese property. And finally, 17B is another painted over,
Very good job.
another cemetery painted over. So there are 6 cemeteries that they did this to, as far as we could tell, and as we've shown in the documents. So the cemeteries is not just the only legal maneuver that is oh yeah, we need to look at the website now. And when we look at the website in the cemeteries, we know that they filed bankruptcy in January 2015. In February of 2015, the website that they had shows the Catholic Cemeteries are a corporation of the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, that coordinates the management of the Archdiocese-owned cemeteries and provides consultation and support. We also see on their website that, of course, the board is presided over by the Archbishop, and he appoints a number of clerics and others who are officials on that board. What did they do? On the website, they removed any trace of the identity or the ownership or the control of the Archdiocese or the Archbishop. And they only refer to it as Catholic Cemeteries. Here, in contrast to that, and they create a new board that doesn't name the Archbishop or any of the officials formerly appointed. And now are saying that it is a separate corporation, not controlled or in any way owned or operated by the Archdiocese. Thus, they hid that information. Anything else on that? I'd like to go to the Catholic Community Foundation as another example. Now, the Catholic Community Foundation, according to the records that we have so far, currently holds $270 million. At least as of 2006. And what's significant about that is in the early 1990s, there was a case that we tried in Anoka against the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, involving the concealment of sexual abuse. And a verdict was rendered for $3.5 million. And because of that verdict, a punitive damages verdict, the Archdiocese and then Archbishop hatched a plan with Kevin McDonough as his lieutenant in executing it. And the plan was, and has continued to be, to take the money held in the Catholic Community Foundation and try to separate it into another corporation. That corporation, however, remained under the exclusive control of the Archbishop. But they didn't want it to look that way, so they created what I call optical insulation. But the actual reality is, it's an Archdiocese asset. And let me play a video of when I questioned Kevin McDonough, the former Vicar General, and 20 years on the scene at the right hand of the bishops, from Roach to Flynn to Nineset, about this Catholic Community Foundation and why it was created. Let's play the video.
And were you aware of any discussions had that was created to limit liability or exposure for sexual abuse claims that were then imminent and pending?
Yes.
That question was, were you aware that the Catholic Community Foundation was created to limit liability for sexual abuse claims? And were there discussions about that? The answer was, his lips to my ears, yes. It's an admission by him. That was made on April 16th, 2014, when we were taking his and the other officials' depositions. We also, when we look at the incorporation documents of 1992, when they created this corporation in anticipation of legal liability because of the verdict, when we look at an incorporating documents, we see the Catholic Community Foundation. Kevin McDonough is the moderator of the Curia, and when incorporated, McDonough was the incorporator, appointed to be so by the Archbishop. When we look at the next page, we see his signature under the supervision of the Archbishop. When we look at the incorporating documents, we see that this is incorporated by the Archbishop, his Lieutenant McDonough, the designated incorporator. In other words, this had been held, this had been created, this had been devised as a part of a scheme to avoid having to pay claims they knew were imminent by reason of their conduct or misconduct, as reflected in a jury verdict in the early 1990s. Let's fast forward to the present. For years and years and years, they hid behind the statute of limitations, and all the claims would begin to be thrown out, and all the survivors turned away as they refused to pay claims and or make peace with survivors. And then the Child Victims Act passed just 3 years ago. What did they do? And by the way, this shows the Articles of Incorporation that the Archdiocese of Minneapolis and St. Paul shall be called the Catholic Community Foundation of Minnesota. So these are the incorporating documents. And what does this show, Mike?
Shows that they changed the name in October of 2013.
In October of 18th of 2013, this is after the Child Victims Act is passed, before they filed bankruptcy, but not long before.
This is after John Doe 1 severed his lawsuit, and there were several other lawsuits against the Archdiocese.
And so this would be after John Doe 1, the first and lead case, filed his lawsuit, and other suits started to be brought against them. They changed the name. And they changed the name of the corporation to the Catholic Community Foundation of Minnesota.
They shut it down.
And in the documents, when we look at these, we also see that if the corporation gets shut down, which it wouldn't be, because it holds a lot of money under the control of the Archbishop, but if it did, under the original incorporating documents, it reverts immediately to the Archbishop. When they change the name, if it were to be shut down, it reverts to other foundations, not the Archbishop. It's a scam, and it's a scheme, and it's a sham. And it's a lot of money. Anything else on that, Mike? The next is the Catholic Finance Corporation. Now, the Catholic Finance Corporation, as far as we can tell, as of 2008, held $30 million. And this, again, has been hidden from us, from the disclosures to the bankruptcy court, to the disclosures to the survivors, and represented not to be a part of the Archdiocese or under his control, but the documents, the affidavit of Jennifer Hasselberger, the affidavit of Father Tom Doyle, and other documents included in this filing demonstrate that the Catholic Finance Corporation is controlled by the Archbishop and for the sole benefit of the Archdiocese and its parishes. It says the corporation is organized and shall be operated for the benefit of, to perform services, or to carry out the purposes of the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, and the Catholic schools within the geographical boundaries of the Archdiocese, parishes, and Catholic schools outside the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis. And
So the yellow here is what it used to be, is what the Catholic Finance Corporation was before, for the sole benefit of the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, and its parishes and its schools. And then after filing bankruptcy, after the Child Victims Act, they added it to try and make it appear that it was more than just this Archdiocese.
in other
Added the
words,
green language.
they changed the articles to, instead of being for the sole benefit of the Archdiocese, they changed it and added language to make it look like it was not for the sole benefit of the Archdiocese, and therefore not under the explicit control of the Archbishop. And the documents reflect this as a part of the scheme and the plan to hide, conceal, and not the reality, and to hide the truth. The next is the Catholic Services Appeal. And here we have
There's no documents.
an annual revenue stream that these documents show that before December of 2013, the Archdiocese directly controlled these funds. And the documents show this. After December 2013, they formed a brand new corporation to keep the funds outside of, at least appearing to be outside of, the control of the Archbishop and the Archdiocese. And that is another example. Another example that is sought to be consolidated into and for consideration of their actual true net worth are the parishes, and there are over 200 parishes that have been separately incorporated. And they claim that because they were separately incorporated, they aren't a part of the Archdiocese bankruptcy. But the reality, operationally, structurally, and functionally show, and these documents demonstrate clearly, that it is the Archbishop that is in control of the parishes. It is the Archbishop that appoints the board and sits as president. It is the Archbishop that appoints his first assistant, the Vicar General, such as Kevin McDonough, to sit on that board. And then he appoints the pastor to sit on that board of 5 with 2 lay people. So control of that corporation is in the Archbishop. But actual control goes beyond that, because the board, as these documents show, rarely have any say in the true operations. It is the Archdiocese and the Archbishop that controls it. And it is only the Archbishop and the Archdiocese that has the ability, legally and structurally, under the internal law and the directions of the Vatican, to close a parish, or to move assets in or out of a parish, or to supervise the overall finances of the parish. And it also shows, at our investigation, and Jennifer Hasselberger and others demonstrate through these documents, that the Archbishop for many years uses the parishes as a piggy bank, both to pledge assets, to borrow money from and to, and move it back and forth, so that they are effectively, to use the words of a former parish administrator and priest, simply a department of the Archbishop or the Archdiocese. And so we share this with you and examples of what has been happening here. Because what has been happening in this bankruptcy and what has been being done by Archbishop Neidenstedt and his predecessors is a serious and sinister scheme to hide, to conceal their true net worth, and not have to account to the survivors, who now have a right to hold them into account. That in itself, and the level of deceit and deception, and the amount of money, the difference between $1.7 billion and $40 million, is an underreporting of their net worth about to the magnitude of 99%. And that's not disturbing enough. A year and a half ago, I stood with the Archdiocese officials and said there was a new day and a new way, and there was a commitment to transparency and accountability. This isn't transparency, and it's far from accountability. They have abandoned that pledge. And as soon as we started to see what their finances look like as they represented them to us, we began to say, wait a minute, this isn't transparency, and this is not the truth. These are lies, deceits, and deceptions, much like the lies, deceits, and deceptions they chose to employ in the movement and transfer of offending priests to protect their reputation. Now they're doing all that they can to protect their assets. The same kind of deceit, the same kind of deception, the same kind of concealment, the same kind of scheme under the radar, thinking that they could do this without scrutiny. These documents demonstrate and have been assembled by the committee and our team to show that this is a scheme that can't continue, that they've tried to deceive and mislead the court, the people, the parishioners, and the rightful survivors who are entitled to some measure of accountability. They have abandoned that pledge, and they have continued to revert and engage in the same practices that we've been having to call out for over 30 years when it comes to their finances. I share this this information with no joy. It is sorrowful and it is sad, but it is also imperative that the truth be known and that real transparency be required. And that's why this motion right here demands some measure of accountability by moving for what is called substantive consolidation, to pull all these assets from the parishes to the schools and their true worth into the bankruptcy estate, so that ultimately the survivors, who are the creditors in this case, can be treated fairly. And all the assets can be considered in how they can be treated fairly. And in the absence of that full consideration, it becomes a half-truth, a whole lie, more deceit and more deception. And in my view, what they've done here financially is a further victimization of the survivors, another betrayal of the promises that they made, the pledges that they made, and the promises they've been making over the years that they're going to do better and be better, and particularly when they promise to be transparent. hiding assets, undervaluing assets, changing title, changing the optics of control when in fact control remained where it did, are all the kinds of schemes that corporate criminals like Enron engage in. And when we look at what this archdiocese and this Archbishop Nienstedt and his predecessors have done here, it makes Tom Petters look like a piker. Questions? Mike, is there anything to add?
What's going to make this different from Milwaukee? Weren't the same arguments advanced in Milwaukee?
The question is how is this different in Milwaukee, and aren't the arguments the same? The answer is this is an entirely different universe than Milwaukee. We were representing the survivors in Milwaukee, over 350 of them, and a total of 550 claims. Two major differences in Milwaukee were, number one, the claims in Milwaukee were time barred. And the court had made some rulings that indicated that many, if not all, of the claims would be time barred. And therefore, we never got to the point where we were able to seriously get scrutiny of the true financial picture in Milwaukee and get consolidation or ask for consolidation with a factual basis we've formulated here through the use of experts, through the use of internal documents, through the use of financial and accounting records. And in Milwaukee, the reality became that because the claims were to be thrown out, before that whole question of what was to be included in the estate, it never got reached and got settled. Sadly, but very different. It's also notable that we didn't have access to the information in Milwaukee that we did by reason of the fact that we've been involved with this archdiocese, watching its operations, scrutinizing its practices, financial and otherwise, for now 30 years. And what we know has been done here is now documented and documentable. What they did in Milwaukee, we never had a chance to fully vet, and we never had a chance to reveal it to the court the way we think we have today.
Is this an indication mediation's not going well?
The question is this an indication that mediation is not going well? I think it's fair to say that mediation has concluded, was not successful. It's fair to say that this motion would never have to have been brought had it. Had there been a full and fair disclosure made in the original filings by the Archdiocese, or they chose to amend it and say, okay, our initial disclosures were deficient, we made some mistakes, we underreported, we actually, if they had chosen to amend their schedules and be honest and transparent and candid with us, we wouldn't have been required to bring this motion and have any contention around it, but they didn't. They chose to adhere to the position at all times, from the first filing to this point in time, that they have such limited assets, they can't even cover 10% of these claims. And the reality is, that's a lie.
So what are you saying the Archdiocese has available? Is it 10 million, 20 million, 40 million?
What these documents and the affidavits of Jennifer Hasselberger and others demonstrate that the Archdiocese currently has, taking liabilities out, assets of $1.7 billion And all of those assets are under the direct authority and control of the Archbishop. And if they are no longer held in his name or title, that's because they changed the documents to make it look like he wasn't in control, when in fact, the canon law, the decrees from the Vatican require the Archbishop to be in control of the schools, the parishes, the cemeteries, the finance commission, the foundations, and all the other corporations, 15 separate entities that have been set up. And that is the reality, and that is what is demonstrated in this motion, and that is what the committee is seeking the court to find, and that's what we are joining in asking the court to do.